On Tony Gosling's radio show, did you allude to a possibility of a rumour that you'd heard of a possible incident at the Olympics?
Well,
at the end of it or something?
Yeah, well, yeah, it wasn't a rumour. The trainers came out into the classroom. I've heard what everyone else has heard. Yeah, they may have changed their tactics now, but then everyone heard the same thing, and it was at the end of the Olympics. Yeah, there was going to be a defining moment in the history of London that we could all be involved in. And I went, oh, what's that like? The Paralympics? Because that's after the Olympics, and that's the Paralympics. You know, no. You know, and I thought, well, yes, because I wouldn't put the Paralympics as a separate event. As far as I'm concerned, it's the Olympics and the Paralympics, right? So what's this event? We can't say, right? But there's going to be a defining moment in the history of London, and you're all going to be involved. Give yourself a round of applause, I think she said, right? So, you know, everyone clapped and cheered and stuff, and I found that quite sinister. And I said, well, what's the event? She goes, I can't say, but it's going to be good. So on one hand, you could take that as being, as to meaning, well, we could all have jobs with G4S. And if you're long-term unemployed and you really want to work for G4S, then that'd be good news, right? Or it could be something sinister. She did say that we would be interfacing directly with the public. We would be dealing with the public, right? And that's what I was like, well, that's strange. And in context of all that, this was kind of off the back of a conversation about the evacuation of London, or at least a possible evacuation of London. And again, G4S staff would all be involved in this, right? Well, why would you need to evacuate London unless something so horrific had happened at the Olympics? You know, for example, like a biological weapon had gone off. That everyone in London would want to leave, and so they needed a lot of help doing that, you know. So I found that all very sinister, and I didn't think it needed to be said. I felt that I learnt more about the evacuation of London, but I didn't learn anything about the evacuation of the Olympic Stadium. Nothing.
Nothing about the Olympic Stadium?
Nothing about the evacuation. So in the event of, say, like Hillsborough, right?
Yeah.
No one told us how to evacuate or talk us through how to evacuate the Olympic Stadium. No one's told us about if there's a crush in a pinch point, what do we do? Nothing. But they told us about the evacuation of London. This is crazy.
What did they tell you about the evacuation of London?
Well, there would be one. There's a possible evacuation of London, and we would all be involved in dealing with the public.
Well, where would they put everybody in London?
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. They didn't say that. They didn't get that far. I have no idea.
And somebody else can verify this?
Yeah, I think other people have said it, you know, repeatedly said, yes, that's what was said in the classrooms, you know.
Who else has said it?
Oh,
You know?
somebody on a radio show said that it was the True News show in Florida, and this guy had been on that guy's show, and he said that there was a false flag event, this guy said, was going to happen, and that there was evacuation of London in place. The security services have done it, they know about it, it's in place. So that's generally what I was told to me, that there's an evacuation of London. She didn't then go on to say, and there's going to be a false flag, and you know, or whatever event. Of course they're not going to say that, they just said, you're going to be involved in the evacuation of London.
Who was this that said this? Was it this Michael
Shipton? Is
Shipton.
it QC? Michael Shipton?
Michael
QC?
Shipton actually said there's going to be...
On this nuclear... I'll tell you, okay, this is the story that he said. On this True News, yeah? If you need it verified, I'll give you the number for True News, or the email address, you can do that. This Michael Shipton said on that show, so I'm quoting and paraphrasing him on the show, right? Said that he had intel given to him by a Russian spy that was up on a website for a matter of minutes. Yeah, this Russian spy put this information up on this website, told him about it, he took it down, and it was about a nuclear weapon being brought in to London by the German DVD force, which is their top special forces, kind of secret police kind of thing, a bit like our MI5 and MI6. And they said that it was then discovered or uncovered or something, and it was then having to be spirited away on a submarine out of the Thames estuary. Whether you believe it or not, that's what he said. So check him out, and I'll give you the details so you can verify that. So don't take my word for it at all. Yeah, I'm just basically saying in the classroom they said about an evacuation of London. I don't know anything about this. This is a story that they told to me, and that I've just told to you. So you need to investigate that portion of it. All I can tell you is that that's what was talked about. So these things have been said in the room. They also said about there's 200,000 casket linings. I didn't even know what a casket lining was when they said it. And I said, what's that? And they went, it's like a plastic coffin. You could put 4 bodies in it. And I'm thinking, well, hold on a minute. You've just told me about an evacuation of London. You've told me about these, casket linings and this kind of stuff. Why would you say that? Now, again, one side of my brain says, well, they're trying to big up the Olympics. They're trying to say it's such a major operation. These are all the things that's having to be thought about above your head, right, kind of thing. Or they're talking out of turn, and or they're I don't say talking out of turn because they're telling everybody. They're not realising actually what they're saying is that major, because this is a script. All these trainers read a script. They learn a script. You can tell it's a worked patter. And they're telling everyone the same thing, not realising how sinister it is or how dangerous it is.
To them it feels normal.
That's what I mean, yeah, because they're all military people, so it doesn't mean anything. See, that's why they think we're all weak.
Yeah.
They say, oh, well, considering to have 200,000 people being killed at the Olympics, why not? Well, the thing is that there's 80,000 members of the public that's going to be there. There's like 100,000 backroom staff, everybody who works at the Olympics. There's all the contractors and people that do the concessions and all sorts of security people. So it adds up to about 100,000 people who are going to be in that park and in that stadium, and the 80,000 members of the public. So very realistically, those 200,000 casket linings could come in. If something happened just on the park in itself, that you would need a portion of those for that. The fact that actually you put 4 people in it, that's near 800,000 people. That's too expensive. So then you have to imagine something happening that not only involves the Olympic Stadium, the Olympic Park, but also Hackney, Stratford, because this is how big the surrounding population is. And then maybe you'd be up there in those figures, sure. That's how scary I thought it was when I heard it. I certainly didn't dismiss it.
Did you see these caskets for your linings?
No. I didn't see. Look, I haven't seen them. This is what we just said.
Did they say that these had been planned, contingency plans, months ago, or they've suddenly ordered them in?
No, they didn't say anything like that. No, never said they're sitting over there or anything like that. They just said this is what basically they've got 200,000 casket linings. I'm like, oh, what's that? And this is in the context of evacuating London and it all going, they're painting a terrible picture. Yeah, in my mind, I'm sitting there and watching it, they're painting a terrible picture of a big disaster in London because of the Olympics.
But wouldn't that be expected for them to think of the worst case scenario?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Because we've got a high terror alert
absolutely.
in London.
Yeah, but why tell us? Why did we need to know? If something happens, it happens. You don't need to tell your house security, right? We don't need to know that kind of stuff. That's beyond our pay grade, kind of thing. The stuff you tell the front of house, what they should be telling you is really, this is how to evacuate the stadium. This is how to evacuate the car parks. This is what happens if we need to get an ambulance into the stadium.
And they didn't tell you any of this?
No, none of this. You don't tell people about the worst case scenario. That's for intelligence services. That's for the army to learn. I know an army doctor at Woolwich Barracks. That's where he's based. And back in January, he told me that he was having to have 100,000 troops come through his barracks. Woolwich Barracks is being used as kind of like a focal point where everyone kind of comes in through Woolwich, because obviously it's near Stratford, and they have a medical and they get reassigned and they go off to their various barracks or wherever they're going to be billeted or whatever for the duration of the Olympics, right? And he said there's going to be 100,000 troops going through there. And I said, well, what do you mean 100,000 of our troops? Because I know everyone else is being recalled. Army, Navy, RAF, everybody's being recalled. Unless you're on active duty, in a war, Afghanistan, Iraq, or wherever else, then you're going to be recalled for the Olympics. I understand that. But he said, no. These are, he's seen predominantly American and German troops. That's foreign troops in London right now, right this very second. And he said maybe others, but he couldn't be sure where they come from. So maybe they're an accent or something like that. So that's foreign troops.
So whose orders are they going to be following if they're American or German troops?
Well, he seemed to think that there were some sort of UN troops maybe or something like that, because lots of nationalities. I don't think it's necessarily about whose orders they're going to be following, because they're going to be following whoever's telling them to be here in the first place. So it's obviously our government, or our armed forces, or stuff like that. But again, it doesn't bode well for a big disaster happening. It may not. I hope it doesn't. That's what I'm here for. I want to make it a safer games. I want to try and tell people, say, look, this is how horrible it could be, and this is how bad G4S are doing the training and what kind of things they're doing. But none of this has to be. Right, from the training through to the worst case scenario, we could have a really happy games and a really safe games, and I hope we do. But it doesn't feel good to me. So all these things, like the evacuation of London, or the casket linings, or the 100,000 troops, and all that kind of stuff. Well, you could deny it. No one has. No one's come out and said there aren't these 100,000 troops. He's making it up. That's rubbish. They're here. And the government would be the first people to do that, because they are trying to discredit me right now. I've had phone calls from journalists today, who have tried to discredit me in the phone call, because I've been taking the phone call. Because I talk to everybody. I'm willing to give an interview to everybody. Mainstream media, alternative media, it doesn't matter. I want to tell this story as much as I can. So, but they're trying to discredit me. As well. Some people are, not everybody, obviously. So,
and in what way are they? What techniques have they been using to try and discredit you?
Oh, trying to catch me out in a lie, for example. So, for example, that we'd be in the middle of the conversation, and they'd say, "Oh, but didn't you just say this?" And they'd sort of say the line, and I said, "No, actually, I didn't." And I know exactly what I just said, because it's this. And I've been saying it to everybody. It's the same thing. It doesn't change. My story hasn't changed from day one, because the truth doesn't change. It is the same. I haven't elaborated on anything. Yes, some people have focused a bit more on the sort of the sensationalistic side of things, as well as the sort of more mundane side of security work. But it's all important, so it doesn't matter. It hasn't changed. It's the same story. I've not elaborated on it. I haven't changed it one little bit. So it's the truth. You can only, that's the only thing you can say, really, on that. So I've had to be careful, really. But they would have come out straight away and said I was a liar if I was actually lying. That would be the easiest thing for them to say, because they could prove it, right? Just have a camera crew walk around Woolwich Barracks or something, But my friend said that they were helicoptering, they're Chinooking, in Chinook helicopters, these troops in, and he says you hear them, over Greenwich and what have you, because that's where they're coming in from. And I've got a friend of mine who lives in Greenwich, and out of her window, you're in her flat and suddenly you hear the Chinooks, a big, deep, rumbling sound.
I've heard them here, actually, quite late at night.
That's right, yeah.
Really, really loud.
Yeah, because they come in low.
Because I was half asleep, and I was aware that there was this very low, very loud aircraft type noise,
right, yeah.
and I straight away thought it was to do with the Olympics.
Well, they're choppering in these troops now, so that's how. So that's done under the cover of darkness, and I don't like anything being done under the cover of darkness, and then they're not admitting it to it either. It's all very sinister, as far as I'm concerned. But it doesn't take away from the fact that the security at its basic level is really bad as well. So you've got two different sides to this, really.